he had to put that policy out to the people that are there to shadow the arguments. So the Home Secretary, they then have to make the decisions. They have party consensus. So the leader can set an agenda, but if the party consensus isn't necessarily there, and because the Labour Party was so bad previously under Gordon Brown, those are the ones that reclassified cannabis to a harder position through the whole Professor Nutt debacle. It doesn't really. It gives you an indication that the Labour Party still aren't really there to grasp the nettle yet. They still haven't got it.
I just have to back you because again, this was Nixon's war. That's why I wonder how the Liberals and the Labour movement and the people on the left just follow the same argument as administration. That's what I don't get. They do the same here in Norway too. Like, no, this is not your history. It's the far right's history. Why are you following them in these questions? What happened during the war that I didn't get?
Exactly. And this is, you could argue that this is a wider issue, that if anything, then the rest of the country leads because of how integral they are to the UN and how much that dictates policy. And see the effects of it here, that, I mean, I don't want to start spreading this issue out into other sectors, but a report came out here recently how we Also, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sorry, you just went all quiet. We tend to go where America tells us, and I'm just going to react now that after our European exit, it might get worse, it might get better, and it depends what happens with Donald Trump if that gets in and how that's going to react. So it's all up in the air of how much we are going to start following their policies from this point on. But historically, they are the trendsetter. They put the policies on the map and then we act. And it's strange. You can separate that culturally. I think that we've got a better approach to harm reduction in this country with regards to needle exchange, heroin-assisted treatment. Also, we do get decriminalisation. We do understand it because we've come through the legal highs, as they're called, or psychosis. We have criminalised possession. We've made sure that we stop short of that. It's still very much law enforcement is focused on supply. So we understand how decriminalisation helps individuals, but we still can't apply that to wider drug policy, and that's because of the UN conventions and what the perception of sanctions that have come through because of people like the US. But then if you look at Uruguay and Canada now, you can't sanction Canada, that are so prominent in the world states. So they're going to go ahead and do this, and then if they do that, it's probably going to set the way for the other countries to go, actually, we can do it now.
I had a big hope for the UN now when they met in April, but I was so disappointed. What happened?
It was a washout when it didn't really go anywhere, and I think it's because it always goes for the lowest common denominator. Because you had countries like Russia and the hardline ones like Singapore saying no, for example, there are still, I think it was 8 countries now that still support death penalty for drug use. So all the way you've got that core that's sinking us down at the bottom, then you're not going to be able to get those overarching reforms at the top. So unfortunately, it is going to have to be an international consensus to some degree. We probably will segregate at some point because ideologies are so separate. But the UNGAS was disappointing. I think most people realised that UNGAS was going to be just another going through the motions. But it served well to get some messages out there. It meant that we could do some press work around it. And I still maintain that it's going to have to be a cultural change at the bottom. Just like if you can look at other social rights that have been out there in the past, civil liberties, it's that same core and the same momentums that we're going to need in this discussion.
But also the money here. In American politics, it's always all about the money. And the people behind try to stop the prohibition, there's very hardline people who own private prison, like the medical industry, who's very powerful, too powerful, even in Norway they are powerful. Why doesn't that get addressed?
There are a lot of vested interests to keep how it is. And
the breweries, I heard in Britain, started try to stop legalization of cannabis.
We got some strange alliances like that. Again, in America, there's a gambling mogul that's trying to prevent some reforms going through. So someone's going to get dented profits somewhere along the lines if we had regulated cannabis systems, whether it be private prisons, whether it be the knock-on effects to industries like alcohol or even potentially pharmaceuticals. I noticed the Young Turks put out a piece the other day about how the pharmaceutical industry is getting a bit of a dent now. I don't think it's going to be hugely significant because the pharmaceutical industry is a Goliath in its own right. But if you only chip away at one tiny bit of profits from each one of these sectors, then you made powerful enemies. And especially a privatised prison system. We're not quite so bad in this country in the way that it's so widespread. But I think the privatised prison system here is creeping through, and I think per capita, I think we're worse, if I remember rightly. And if that takes a hold, then privatised prisons need people to fill it. Drug consumers are the low-hanging fruit, as they say. And you can see how that is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm going to say that there's a fun fact there, because in Norway we don't have enough prison space. So we send the people to the Netherlands. The people in Netherlands have stopped. They have a lot of open capacity.
That's it,
They stop punishing people using drugs. So that's very interesting there.
And how bizarre is that as well, that you're having to offset your own prison population to another country? That's almost, again, historically, that goes back to what we were doing in the Victorian times. We've got this strange archetypal view again, but we can't see it at the moment. We're so blinkered in our approach, and you have to remember as well, as drug laws are quite recent history. That you go back to previous centuries. It wouldn't have even been dreamt of that consuming something would put you in a position of prosecution.
No, that's also, people said, I discussed, if you want to legalize cannabis, you're legalizing crime. Why not legalize burglary or rape? That is the argument I get met with. You want to legalize criminal acts.
There's quite a simple response to that as well. Because we've got ways of differentiating law. We know that, obviously, in our conversation, we're very much aware that someone that's smoking cannabis or maybe injecting drugs for whatever reason is certainly not going to be the same as someone that's burglary or rape or murder. But if you want to separate that by law, we've got a thing called mala in se, which is an evil in itself, which is murder, rape, burglary. It involves a victimised crime. And then you've got mala prohibitum, which means that the state has seen it fit to sanction something, prohibit something, and therefore you can get prosecuted for it. So we know that there's separate laws, but we shouldn't even need to explain that because it's just, it's such a moot point.
Yeah, I have a problem, but this is still a legitimate argument, even from the left to the right in the politics. So the conservative government now, they don't want to legalize anything. They believe in more jail time.
Really?
Stop young people. They want forced testing at school sometimes.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
So this is a realm that really worries me is mandatory testing. Because again, if you go down that route, you're going down the Swedish route, you're going down an erosion of civil liberties, and there needs to be a respectable buffer between state and citizen.
And you're filling up the prisons. Yeah.
And I imagine in this country we certainly can't afford that right at the moment. I'm not sure about Norway, but we can't afford all those prisons and the amount of prisoners. And the only way we could is through a privatised system. And again, if you're going down that route, then it's a scary realm.
I'm pro-business, but I'm not business on everything when it comes to health, schools, and prison. I'm not. But we have a strange thing because this is what I often meet. Because I work as a security guard, and I see we put in young people in prison who have had some drug problems, and they are coming out and get more and more criminal every time because they get more hard line. How can we really defend a system who just use the prisons as like high school fed criminal education?
And we're having a bit of a conversation. Well, we were having a conversation on that here. Michael Gove, who's now left government, he was putting judicial reform and prison reform on the map, and we had some great documentaries that came out as well on our national TV and our channels about what the prison system does to an individual and how it perpetuates harm. I don't know how we can get outside of the mentality that prisons are in any way, shape or form rehabilitation, because they're just out and out not. Once you go in there, it's going to be very difficult to get your life back on track. And there's an organisation here called the Howard League for Penal Reform that are brilliant at this. Yeah, they're arguing for less prisons, more in the way of intelligent sentencing, and also just, as you said, education, because it's needed. If you can go in, if you've committed a crime, which there are plenty out there that you can do, if you do get prosecuted for it, and the chances are you're not going to be able to get your life back on track because of what that prosecution does. I think it's one of the Leap founders called Jack Cole. One of his sayings is that if you've got a drug conviction, now let me get this straight. You can recover from a conviction, but you can't. No, you can recover from an addiction, but you can't recover from a conviction. Sorry, I've completely messed that up, but you get the idea. Yeah. It's easier to arguably, and I don't want to belittle anybody's plight of what they've gone through with fighting an addiction, because it's that needs utmost sensitivity and respect. But it's true that you can make a case that if you have got a conviction to your name, your life is going to be so much harder to get on with, especially in America, because of, you're not going to be able to go to college. So how do you get your life back on track from that point? So you can see how it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that once you're on that road of criminality, that it's only going to get worse from that point on.
Yes, also it's enormously expensive. You can use helping people with problems.
And this is what happened in Portugal. They managed to apply their budget from a criminal justice over to a health, and they're not going to be turning back. They've realised that this works. And again, in Ireland, they're going to be doing the same. Yeah. I think we're getting there in this country in the sense that we're starting to realise that we're going to, if we apply our resources to health as opposed to prosecution, it has benefits. But I think it's going to be a softer approach. I think it's going to be done through a bit of a backdoor action as opposed to it just being hailed in the papers.
I'm going to take some issues from Norway now, because there's a lot of discussion here about what is the result of the Colorado and Washington drug politics. The people are against legalization. They always say, it went to hell, it's failure, we don't have to do that in Norway. What is your opinion on that? Or what is the science says about that? It's better to ask.
It's certainly interesting, because I think one of the things, if we're pro-drug policy reform, then I think we do need to contextualise it that there is no one-size-fits-all. I think we do need to there can be a tendency to say, right, all reform is a success, but it's how you measure that multi-criteria analysis. So Colorado have done brilliant on their taxation. I can't remember what it is now. It's ridiculous amounts of taxation that they've managed to roll in, which some of it's going to school, some of it's going to rehabs. Some people are saying that there's a little bit of a failure in the sense that of marketing. They've not learnt from tobacco and alcohol marketing like we have in this country, where we've limited it now. We don't mind regulating things in this country in the sense that we don't tend to, we're socialist leaning, and we don't use the word socialist as a dirty word, whereas in America, they very much still view socialism as a kind of a throwback to an era that wasn't useful. Whereas once they realise that socialism doesn't mean what they think it means, it just means a bit more of a social awareness. And with the taxation process, it's great for accumulating that they can go back and roll in. But you can do things as well to ameliorate the marketing. So if you look at Uruguay compared to Colorado, Uruguay have gone for that state regulation model, which means that it's in the hands of the state. They're going to grow, they're going to distribute, they're going to set the taxation level so that it's just right to get some profit, but at the same time that it's not pricing out the black market, because you need to think in terms that if you set a taxation too high, can it enforce the black market? There is some evidence that the black market exists in Colorado, but it's early days. There isn't going to be that, right, we've sorted it out now. This is going to be a work in progress for a lot of time. We've had a prohibition in place for so many decades that we're going to need to understand that incremental steps are going to get us to where we need to be. So Colorado are doing great and a great success. I don't think it's a model that we're necessarily going to employ in the UK. I think that we're more likely to go for a softer approach